if you are vaccinated, you're much less likely to catch COVID-19. So you're a lot less likely to transmit it to those vulnerable people who may get very, very unwell with COVID-19. So even though if you're a young person and you are very low risk of dying from the coronavirus, you can still get quite unwell from it. And having been vaccinated, you're much less likely to get that chronic fatigue type syndrome afterwards. And you're much less likely to have chronic complications or catch it in the first place. And that's one of the things that we've got to remember, that it's not just the death rate that you've got to look at, you've also got to look at the morbidity, or the people that have had coronavirus that are now suffering consequences from it. So that's the question that we get quite often, and it's because usually the vaccine development process takes a really long time. The reason it takes a long time is because it's got many, many different stages. So first you go through an exploratory stage where you look for vaccine candidates. Then you have to try and find which candidates work in a preclinical type of way without using humans. Then you go into 3 stages of human experiments. And then after those 3 stages, you have to get approval, and then you need to start manufacturing the vaccine. And between each of those stages, you need to prove yourself to be able to get money and funding to go on to the next stage. And it costs time and money to do that. So one of the things that when they've done their COVID vaccinations is, firstly, they've got a huge number of people that are trying to get that vaccine. So for a small number of that candidates, they have been able to get through that exploratory and find their candidate reasonably quickly to start going through the human trials. And also they've got a lot of money available, so they don't need to ask for money between each of the stages. So they can immediately going from finding a vaccine candidate to their stage 1 trials without having to beg for money, basically. And then from their stage 1 trials, they go to the stage 2 trials and the stage 3 trials. And they've been able to compress that because they don't need to ask for money between each of them, which is the thing that takes a huge amount of time often. The next thing that some of the candidates have done is they've started manufacturing the vaccine before they've got approval. And this is a dangerous thing for a company, because if they don't get approval, they've got to throw all those vaccines out. I think that there is individual circumstances, so you can't just put a blanket, you have to get it. You need to look at your individual circumstances, and for some people there are specific things that may be of concern. So for example, some people with severe allergies need to be careful about what vaccine they get. So one of the good things is that we've got a number of different vaccines and they've got different components. So if somebody has a severe allergy, they might want to go and talk to their doctor and make sure that the vaccine that they want to get is not something that's got something that they're very allergic to in it, because you don't want someone to have an allergic reaction to a vaccine. Sometimes people who have got immune disorders or who are quite unwell get concerned about it, and that's understandable. And that's one of the reasons why you talk to your specialist about it. One of the problems with somebody with major medical problems is that while they may have concerns about different vaccines, they're also much more likely to get very unwell if they were to catch coronavirus. So that in that situation, it's very important to talk to your specialist and see if there's a way that a vaccine will work for you or what you need to do. Yes, a lot of people are nervous about getting a vaccine. As a doctor, I know that vaccines are safe, and I know that it's the best thing for my children. But when I got my children their vaccines, I was still nervous, to be honest, even though I know that they're really, really safe and important. The day that I went and got my first child their needles, I was nervous, and it's normal. The benefits significantly outweigh the risks in terms of vaccine, particularly these vaccines, given the amount of coronavirus around. When you've got questions, it's important to look at the right resources and to look at credible resources. So Facebook is not the best place to get things from. There's a number of government resources, and I can't think of them off the top of my head, I'm sorry. And there are also the TGA. One thing you do have to remember when you're looking at the TGA website is because one of the things that we've had is people saying, well, there's so many reports of problems after these vaccines through the TGA, and that's because anybody who's had any sort of event after the vaccine will be reported to the TGA, and then they look into it to see, is this because of the vaccine or is it just something that may have happened anyway? They've got a lot of reports, but not all of those reports are necessarily complications of the vaccine. It's just that they want people to report so they can find these things. A medical practitioner obviously is the best place to look for information. And often, as I say, if you have a specific medical problem that needs a specialist, so for example, you've got a specific lung problem or a respiratory problem or an immune system problem, it's often better to talk to your specialist about that rather than your GP, because your specialist is the one that knows about that condition clearly, and they also, because they've got a lot of other patients with the same problem as you, then they've done the research to look at what that'll mean for your vaccine.